Hey there, my name is Brayton Shackout, and here's my courtroom observation video presentation. This is the second time I'm going through it, because the first time I did not have audio, which I thought was pretty funny. So, let's go over the basics. The building name is the Delaware County Justice and Rehabilitation Center. There are multiple buildings part of this building, so there's like the county clerk's office, a whole bunch of stuff, all collected into one large building. And then it's in the south side of Muncie, Indiana. Our observation types, I did 2 in-person court observations, and then I stayed with my friend for about 2 hours each time. Technically, we had a third, but I didn't really think the first time we did it, it was overly efficient, so I just prompted to go and get more information, maybe better record it, because the first time going just didn't work very well. And then our observation dates, we went on 03/27/2024, and of course, 4/16/2024. During both of the times, we went at 9 in the morning, as we kind of thought that going there early was going to be the best choice of action so we could hear the most, and also we wanted to make sure we could still go to class. My first case was a pre-trial, and then my second was an initial hearing. Both had a couple of issues with them, but I'll discuss that when we actually get to the cases. So, here is our courtroom. It is a rectangular room with seating arranged in tiers facing the front, as you can see in the top left. That photo shows a pretty spitting image of what our courtroom looked like. I believe that is courtroom 2. Ours is courtroom 1. The only difference is there wasn't like things on the side of it, as you can see on the jury stand, and there wasn't a giant pillar. That's literally about it. Other than that, they're spitting images of each other. At the front of the room is the judge's bench, raised higher than the rest of the courtroom, of course. The area in front of the judge's bench is where the prosecutor, public defender, defendant, and the witnesses will sit and stand. You can see the 2 benches right there. There are 2 tables facing the judge. One is for the prosecution on the left, and the one is for the defense, which is on the right. Seating is for the public is behind the area designated for attorneys and participants. You can kind of see a couple of seats there. We were sitting a bit further in the back for our first one, and then for the next 2, we moved up to the front just because I'm blind and I thought it was way easier to read name tags and everything like that. And something that I found really funny was apparently the building used to be a school, which someone told us about this in class prior, and I was like, okay, like a little odd, but all right. And then you get there and it really is a school. Each of the courtrooms look kind of like a high school classroom, except a bit bigger, but it was just really funny to see. And in the top right, you can see the outside. Top left, of course, is our inside. Notable actors. We have the judge, a very well-respected judge. We actually had not multiple, but 2, who was taking over for our normal standing judge. She acted kind of as the overseer and the leader of the courtroom, a very, very friendly, joking person, as I will talk about later. A bit surprising so, just because I didn't expect it, but I'll talk about that more in a little bit. We had Judge Calhoun and Judge Voorhees for each one of our cases. For our second one, Judge Calhoun took over. Then we have our public defender, Mr. Dunnock. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. The attorney provided legal counsel even when the defendant did not show up. Once again, I'll talk about that in a little bit. It was a very odd situation, but I thought it was notable to talk about just for how they dealt with it. And then we have our prosecutor, Mr. Hoffman, a very put together and young prosecutor. We actually had the pleasure with speaking with him, and he's very close to the judge. Oh, sorry for the pop-up. Where was I? Oh, of course. And then we have our bailiff. He was an older gentleman, an older officer, and he did not seem very happy to be there, but I will say I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt as we got there very early. It was 9 o'clock. I wouldn't want to be standing for that long either, but honestly, he still did his job. He still did great. We talked to him a little bit afterwards, but I'll talk about that later. Then we have our defendant. Defendant 1 showed up. He wasn't an overall really put together man, but he showed up, which is something to say when you compare it to the next man. And then our court reporter. She was very friendly and a very big participator in the courtroom. She was very nice to speak with. And honestly, the amount of information she was speaking throughout the entire time was really surprising, just because I kind of expected the prosecutor and the judge to have all the information lined up. But I suppose when you're dealing with so many cases, that's not easy to do. In the overall demeanor, it was fairly calm and relaxed, which came to a big surprise. I kind of expected everything to be super strict and I suppose boring, but that's not exactly the correct word. Actors were joking with one another about people not showing up, and it seemed to be a very common issue. And once again, the joking caught us by surprise. Did not expect it. It seemed very out of place for a courtroom. So I don't know if that's just our specific days that we went. It was just really surprising, or it's a pretty common point, but it was really cool to see. So, interactions between everyone. Easy to start with the fact everyone was very friendly with one another. Even the defendant was nice and respectful to everyone. The prosecutor and the public defenders were nice with everybody. They seemed to be friends as well. A bit closer to colleagues than strict like best friends, but the prosecutor and the judge, both judges for that matter, seemed to be very good friends. The prosecutor and the judge seemed to be great friends. During our conversation afterwards, they explained that it's actually a fairly common point because we seem to be very surprised about it, just due to how often they work with one another. And honestly, when you look at them as coworkers, even as one is like upper management and one as just more of a worker, it makes sense. You're with them every single day. Of course, you're going to become friends with them. The bailiff only really spoke once or twice to us, and it was afterwards. He kind of came up when we were asking a bunch of questions and kind of explained his role. He said that it wasn't the most fun job in the world, but it was really necessary to have. And of course, there's been times where it's been really exciting. He's had to go do something. We didn't really prompt this point. It just kind of got brought up. And honestly, I was glad he did. It was really awesome information. Like, it was cool to hear because it's not something you always hear about. Oh my gosh, that's not good. Pardon me. The court clerk and court reporter were speaking near the end. The clerks assisted with dates and all the other basic information that was required. Like I said prior, I do imagine eventually you do just kind of forget some of the stuff. It's a lot of things to talk about. It makes sense. So let's talk about our case number 1, Indiana v. Raymond Purvis. So Mr. Purvis was on trial for theft. It was of a couple $1,000s. It seemed as if I was present for the pretrial conference, and honestly, everything was very efficient and quick, which made a lot of the information hard to get, but that's why we were asking questions afterwards, and it was really nice to be able to speak with them. During this section, we saw Mr. Purvis plead guilty. He took a plea bargain, and this is where they went for the actual plea agreement and all the information for it. Everyone seemed very relieved about it. The judge then made a joke to the prosecutor, and everyone laughed a bit, which was just odd to see because this guy is being punished, and they're all joking around. Even he was laughing a little bit, and maybe it was just nerves. Who knows? The judge then spoke to the defendant. He asked why he didn't show up prior. He didn't really have a real answer. It seemed to cause a lot of issues. And this was the only point where things felt like very serious. It seemed all too common of an issue. Like, it just happened day by day, and we witnessed it happen again later, which I'll talk about in just a second. But it was just a little odd to see. And it was just also odd to see how close they were with one another during the actual pretrial conference, how everyone was speaking with one another. Judge Calhoun, of course, then asked to cancel the next court dates. A jury trial wasn't necessary. And the plea bargain was accepted. He was given a little under a year and 20 hours of community service, which, honestly, when looking at some of the other documents, which I'll talk about later, that seems to be a very good deal to take. Makes sense. Indiana versus Danny R. Cook. So Mr. Cook was arrested for operating a vehicle without a license. He was also in possession of drugs, which violated his probation. He didn't show up. So this is where we got to the warrant process. I expected the warrant to take way longer than it did, and maybe we only did get a part of it, but there was not a reason listed for the absence. So judge took matters into her own hands to force him to show up. Even through this, she seemed to be very lighthearted and fun, which once again, very weird to see. This guy did not show up to court. He is going to be punished. And they're laughing. Like, not at the situation, but just laughing in general. No punishment was listed due to his absence. And it was just very odd to see how fast they moved on. It was a quick process. Everything is very quick with these courts. My thought on everything. I was surprised about the interactions, like I've mentioned multiple times. It was calm and joking throughout. And it just felt a little out of place. But I was all for it. I think that's how it should be. Everything seemed a lot more efficient, I guess you could say, if you're happy. And maybe it was just because we were early in the morning, like everyone was still fresh. It was faster than Ryan and I expected. We knew plea bargains were fast, but we didn't know how fast they were. Everything was so fast. It was quick. It was also surprising about how many people did not show up. I expected a court to be like their top priority. This was not the case. We saw multiple warrants put out for missing court dates. My second example showed just that. So let's talk about some connections. Were we able to identify members of the courtroom work group? Yes, we were. We were discussing them in class. I remember talking about it. I already had a rough idea of what everyone would look like roughly. You know, the judge would be above, the prosecutor and the defender would be sitting in the area, in the main area. And when we got there, everything was really easy to find out. Even the people on the sides who we didn't know at first, we figured it out due to the courtroom administration presentation that we had in class. It just kind of like, you knew what to look for. You knew the major points to look for. And did we notice any social, class, or gender, sexual orientation, religion, or race impacting proceedings? Not the proceedings themselves. No, we didn't see anything at all. The only thing that got mentioned was Judge Calhoun spoke about how it was really new for her because she was put in her judge position much further ago, but it was very unheard of for a female attorney to be moved up to judge that quickly. And it was really cool to hear just for like her perspective of everything and how fast it was going. And it kind of just reminded me of the diversity of the bench article because like everything is becoming more diverse, and I think that's great. I think it will only help our justice system. Part two. The courtroom seemed to have elements of a community. Yeah. As I've talked about many times, they were friends. They knew each other. They spoke about going to lunch at one point, and they knew each other. They were all friends. They all were part of this group together and got everything done very quickly. And it was even really funny just to see how they interacted with the public defenders who moved out very quickly, as there were multiple we saw. But even he was laughing and he was smiling and he was part of everything. And it reminded me of the Why the Public Defenders Enjoy Their Jobs article. Because like, he may have been busy, but he got to leave quickly, move on to the next thing. And I just thought that was really cool. Were the sentences given fair from my position as a student who's learned about criminal courts? Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, the plea bargain itself, like, it made complete sense. He pleaded. He got off on a lesser punishment and less jail time. And community service? Yeah. And even after looking at the Indiana sentencing guideline document, like, I think he got off pretty well. I think the judge handled it very well. She thought that the community service would work a lot better than the actual prison itself, and I agree. I think it would as well. And were we able to observe any elements of focal concern theory in action? Yeah, for sure. When discussing the sentencing, the judge took into account the type of crime, the fact it was their second offense, didn't show up. She issued a warrant because he was given a time and place to be. All of these are things she thought about prior, and I would also say the judge took a lot of risk assessment. She seemed to be particularly interested in community service, as I said a minute ago. She thought that the prison would make the situation worse and it would even become a bigger problem later. Instead, she just used community service and of course the jail time. It still was there. You couldn't get off scot-free. And it just kind of made me think of the overview of the process model, where it's just, you go through this process so many times, and eventually, yeah, you know what you're doing, you know what to look for, you know that straight prison is not going to work every time. In our overall summary, the judge, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Dunnock, all very relaxed, very engaged, and very communicative people. We spoke with all of them afterwards, and that was really cool. Got a lot of awesome information. The pre-trial conference was quick, and plea agreements, insanely fast. I knew they were fast. I understand. It's a plea agreement. We talked about it in class. But 5 minutes to 6 minutes is crazy. The judge maintained a very professional and lighthearted demeanor. And like I said, I just thought it was cool to see. I didn't expect it, so it came out of the blue, and it made it a lot more interesting to watch. Inmates filled the jury stand during our first case, and that was just because they had so many to go through. Rapid fire, next person. The judge positioned above everybody else. I thought that was a notable point, just showing her position of power throughout. And then we could see the informal interactions among the courtroom, showing that they're really close friends. The trial showcase peak efficiency, the purpose and the effectiveness of plea bargains. The judge even said if they didn't exist, our system would not work. They needed to be there to make everything work quickly. And then the joking among the courtroom personnel felt a little unprofessional, I thought, but it was awesome to see their camaraderie among colleagues and the fact that they were friends outside of this. And overall, it was just a really great experience. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I went the extra time just because I think my first time I didn't get what I needed out of it. But overall, I had a wonderful time. I think Ryan had a wonderful time. It was a great part of my CJC, journey, I should say. So thank you for listening. I hope you guys have a great day.